Atlanta police are investigating after a mom was killed this week near Cleveland Avenue in Atlanta. The family of Courtney Ree devastated after her sister was also a victim of gun violence just months ago.
27 seconds. That's all it took to capture the most brutal execution ever recorded on a Ring doorbell camera. 10 gunshots echoing through a quiet Atlanta neighborhood on August 20th, 2024. But here's what makes this footage absolutely devastating. 4 children were inside that house, listening to every single shot that tore through their mother's body. The oldest was just 11 years old. He tried to shield his younger siblings, ages 9, 6, and 3, as their mother's screams turned into silence outside their front door. They heard her begging for her life. They heard the gun jam. They heard her plead one final time before 10 bullets ended everything they'd ever known about safety and love. Courtney Ree was 32 years old when she died on that driveway. A single mother who worked double shifts to keep food on the table and clothes on her babies' backs. The Ring camera captured it all. Her desperate run toward a neighbor's porch, her final words, and the methodical way her killer stood over her body to make sure she was dead. Within hours, that 27-second clip was everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Millions of people watching a mother die while eating their breakfast or scrolling during lunch breaks. The video went viral faster than any celebrity scandal or political controversy. People shared it with crying, laughing emojis. They made reaction videos. They turned a woman's final moments into content. Courtney's family was destroyed all over again. Her sister Lena posted desperate pleas on social media, begging strangers to stop turning her sister's murder into entertainment. That's someone's mother, someone's sister, she wrote through tears. But the internet doesn't do mercy. The more the family begged, the more the video spread. Comment sections filled with amateur detectives and armchair psychologists. Everyone had theories about what happened and why. Most of them were wrong, because what really drove this murder wasn't jealousy or money or drugs. It was something far more dangerous, the deadly combination of shame, secrets, and wounded pride. See, this wasn't random violence. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong or a case of mistaken identity. This was calculated revenge. Courtney had discovered something about her ex-boyfriend that he'd kill to keep hidden. And when she made the fatal mistake of telling people the truth about who he really was, she signed her own death warrant. The man who murdered her wasn't some stranger lurking in the shadows. He was Derek Rankins, someone she'd trusted, someone she'd loved, someone who'd shared her bed and met her children. But Derek had been living a double life, and when Courtney exposed that lie to their community, his fragile masculinity shattered into murderous rage. Before we go deeper into what really happened to Courtney, I need to address something. This story involves real children who lost their mother in the most horrific way possible. If you're here for entertainment, click away now. But if you're here because you believe these victims deserve justice and their stories deserve to be told with respect, then prove it. Hit that subscribe button, because every person who watches this without subscribing is essentially saying these lives don't matter enough for a simple click. And honestly, that says more about you than it does about me. Now, for those who actually care about justice, what nobody saw behind Courtney's infectious smile was the prison she'd been living in for months. To everyone else, she was the life of every party. The woman who showed up with her music cranked up and her energy even louder. She was everybody's hype woman, the family cook who made sure there was always something warm on the table even after working 12-hour shifts. But Derek Rankins had been slowly suffocating that light. What started as protective behavior, wanting to know where she was, who she talked to, had morphed into something much darker. He monitored her social media posts, questioned her about every phone call, and made her account for every minute she spent away from him. Classic control tactics disguised as love. Courtney's friends noticed the changes. She stopped showing up to gatherings as much. When she did come around, she seemed distracted, always checking her phone, always worried about getting home. The woman who used to dance until 3 in the morning was suddenly making excuses to leave early. But nobody understood just how dangerous her situation had become. Then tragedy struck the Edwards family in the worst possible way. On May 24, 2024, Courtney's younger sister Citria was gunned down at a family gathering. A stray bullet took her life during what should have been a celebration. Courtney was absolutely shattered. The two sisters had been inseparable, leaning on each other through every hardship life threw their way. Losing Citria changed everything for Courtney. She made a promise to herself that she was going to get her life together, step away from the drama and chaos that had surrounded her. She wanted peace for her children, her 11-year-old son and 3 daughters ages 9, 6, and 3. They'd already lost their aunt to senseless violence. She wasn't going to let anything happen to their stability. But Derek saw Courtney's grief as an opportunity to tighten his grip. While she was vulnerable and mourning, he became even more possessive. He isolated her from friends who might have helped her see what was happening. He made himself indispensable during her darkest moments, then used that dependence to control her even more. The manipulation was textbook. He'd create problems, then position himself as the solution. He'd start arguments about her loyalty, then love-bomb her with apologies and promises. He convinced her that nobody else would understand her pain the way he did, that nobody else would love her children the way he claimed to, that she needed him to survive. What Courtney didn't know was that Derek was living a completely different life when she wasn't around. The man who demanded her complete honesty and transparency was keeping secrets that would eventually cost her everything. While he was controlling every aspect of her world, he was hiding fundamental truths about who he really was. And when those truths finally came to light, his shame would transform into the kind of rage that destroys everything in its path. Everything changed the day Courtney walked in on something she was never supposed to see. Derek had been in jail. The exact charges remain murky in public records, and during his absence, Courtney started putting pieces together that painted a completely different picture of the man she thought she knew. What she discovered would ultimately seal her fate. Derek Rankins, the hyper-masculine street figure who went by Big Derek FR online, had been secretly involved with men. Not just casual encounters, but ongoing relationships that he'd hidden behind his public persona of aggressive heterosexuality. Courtney found messages, photos, evidence of a double life that shattered everything she believed about their relationship. The man who'd been controlling her every move had been lying about the most basic facts of who he was. In Atlanta's underground culture, being on the down low carries enormous weight. For men like Derek, whose entire identity was built on street credibility and masculine dominance, any hint of same-sex relationships could destroy their reputation overnight.
Atlanta police are investigating after a mom was killed this week near Cleveland Avenue in Atlanta. The family of Courtney Ree devastated after her sister was also a victim of gun violence just months ago. 11 Live's Erica Murphy has our top story today. She's joining us live from the neighborhood on the city's southeast side. Just to emphasize that devastation, Erica, this has got to be such a hard story for that area. What are you hearing from people over there?
Definitely devastating for the people who live in this area. Courtney was just 32 years old, and she was caring for 4 young children when her life was cut short on Tuesday, just here off of Cleveland Avenue and Springside Drive. Police say they were called out to the 39 Springside Drive Southeast just before 9 o'clock. They found Reese suffering from several gunshot wounds, and she succumbed to those injuries. Police say that there is now a short ring cam video that is showing the exact moment that her life was taken. We can't show you that video because it is simply just too graphic, but it does show a man shooting her multiple times after Reese appears to plead with him. We spoke with a group here in the Cleveland Avenue neighborhood who works with families affected by violence. They think that they are seeing an increase in violence against women in this area.
Recently, it's been so much violence against women, and it's like they're just being unprotected. There's a family that's here that's ripped apart. Kids don't have a mom. So we, as the community, Mothers Against Gang Violence, we are here to wrap around that family, because when that happens to you, I know personally, because it happened to me, you need support for everything.
Now, we have reached out to APD several times for an update in this case. We have not heard back from them yet, but we do want to say that the family of Miss Reese has created a GoFundMe to help raise money for her burial costs. We do have a link to that fundraiser on our website. That's 11alive.com. Reporting from Atlanta, Erica Murphy, 11 Alive News.
And our thoughts are certainly with her family tonight. Erica, thank you so much for bringing us that update.
The stigma runs deep, especially in communities where image and respect determine your social survival. Derek had built his whole persona around being the alpha male, the protector, the man other men feared and women desired. But here's what made Courtney's discovery so dangerous. She didn't keep it to herself. After months of being controlled, monitored, and manipulated, she finally had something that gave her power over him. She started confiding in friends about what she'd learned, not out of malice, but out of confusion and hurt. She needed to process the betrayal with people she trusted. The conversations started small. Close friends, family members who'd watched her struggle in the relationship. Courtney wasn't trying to destroy Derek's reputation. She was trying to understand how someone could live such a complete lie while demanding total honesty from her. She felt violated, not just by the deception, but by the hypocrisy of being controlled by someone who was hiding such fundamental truths.
Right now, we know that an Atlanta officer is in the hospital and a suspect is dead.
That's right. We've learned that the warrant being served was for the murder of Courtney Reese. That is the mother of four that we've talked to you about that was gunned down last week in Atlanta, not too far from Cleveland Avenue. Big breaking news for you today. We do have our crews spread out in Henry County and Atlanta, bringing you every single angle of this story.
That's right. Our Molly Oak is live tonight where this all happened. But first, let's start with 11 Alive's Joe Ripley, who is outside Grady Hospital, where we know that officer is right now. Joe, what's the latest? How is the officer doing?
Yeah, so we understand the officer is doing fine. He is getting treatment at Grady Hospital, flown in by a Henry County Sheriff's Office helicopter. But the good news, according to the Atlanta Police Chief Darren Shearbaum, this officer is expected to be okay. Of course, he was shot in the arm after trying to help out executing a search warrant down in Stockbridge, Henry County. Chief Shearbaum says, again, that officer should be okay after being shot. We understand this officer is an 18-year investigator assigned to the Southeastern Fugitive Task Force. That's led by U.S. Marshals. That task force executed this search warrant on Derek Rankins, a man accused of shooting Courtney Reese nearly a dozen times, killing the mother of four. She was just 32 years old. She had lost a sister just months before this. U.S. Marshal Thomas Brown tonight says there was an exchange of gunfire during the search warrant and Rankins died.
This was one of those individuals that we wanted to get off of the street. We were able to do that successfully. We are so glad, and we are continuing to pray for the Atlanta officer that was wounded in this.
Of course, this follows a devastating week and a half or so of law enforcement being involved in these sort of confrontations. Two of them, one in Paulding County, one in Carroll County, unfortunately losing their life. The GBI is still investigating how this search warrant unfolded. We're live in Atlanta. Joe Ripley, 11 Alive News.
Joe, thank you so much for bringing us that update from the hospital. Now we want to turn our coverage to Molly Oak, who is down in Henry County. So, Molly, we know that you're just north of the city of Stockbridge. We know that officers from several law enforcement agencies out there tonight. What is the scene where you are right now?
Well, Faith, that focus all day has been on the house right down the street from me. I want you to take a look at this video that we got earlier from all different areas of the scene, because law enforcement had this neighborhood pretty much locked down. Again, this is the scene off Linden Lake in Swan Lake subdivision in Henry County. A member of the U.S. Marshals Southeast Regional Fugitive Task Force says they were serving a murder warrant out of Atlanta when an Atlanta police officer working with their team was shot and hospitalized. APD tells us that warrant was being served this morning. And we know multiple agencies responded to this shooting. From our initial vantage point, we saw Henry County Police, Henry County Sheriff, the GBI, Clayton County Sheriff, Fulton County Sheriff, and the Georgia State Patrol all on scene.
And then more and more cars kept coming, and I finally found where everything was, and then I got stuck, and come to find out, my wife was looking it up online, trying to find out what was going on. Next thing we found out, it was serving a murder warrant, and the marshal got shot, and luckily he's going to come to find out he's going to be okay, but
Now, while law enforcement has definitely dwindled out here, there is still a heavy presence around that house. We'll keep you updated here on the scene as we continue to learn more. Reporting live in Henry County, Molly Oak, 11 Live News.
Word began to spread through their social circles, the way secrets always do. A whisper here, a conversation there, until the information reached people who had no loyalty to keeping Derek's secret safe. In tight-knit communities, gossip travels faster than wildfire, and this particular piece of information was explosive enough to destroy everything Derek had built. What Courtney didn't understand was that she'd just signed her own death warrant. For men whose entire identity depends on maintaining a certain image, exposure isn't just embarrassing, it's existential. Derek's reputation, his street credibility, his sense of self, all of it was built on a foundation that Courtney had just blown apart. And men like Derek don't just accept that kind of destruction quietly. The moment Derek learned that his secrets were out, Courtney stopped being the woman he'd once claimed to love. She became the enemy who'd stolen his identity, his respect, his place in the world. In his mind, she'd committed the ultimate betrayal. And betrayal, in Derek's world, demanded the ultimate punishment. Derek Rankins walked out of jail in late July 2024 a completely different man than the one who'd gone in. Word had already reached him behind bars about what Courtney had been saying. Fellow inmates had made sure he knew that his business was in the streets, that people were talking, that his reputation was crumbling while he sat powerless in a cell. The Derek who got released wasn't just angry. He was humiliated on a level that most people can't comprehend. In his world, respect was currency, and Courtney had bankrupted him. Every day he'd spent locked up, knowing that people were laughing at his secrets, had twisted his shame into something much more dangerous. Pure, calculated rage. Within hours of his release, Derek was actively hunting for Courtney. Friends later told police that he'd been asking around, showing up at places she used to frequent, demanding to know where she was living. This wasn't the behavior of a heartbroken ex-boyfriend trying to reconcile. This was predatory stalking with a clear purpose. Derek had decided that Courtney needed to pay for what she'd done to him. The threats started immediately. Text messages that made Courtney's blood run cold. Social media posts that seemed innocent to outsiders, but carried clear menace for anyone who knew the situation. Derek was letting her know that he was coming for her, that her betrayal wouldn't go unpunished. He wanted her to live in fear before he took her life. Courtney's family noticed a change in her behavior almost immediately. The woman who'd been working to rebuild her life after her sister's murder suddenly seemed paranoid and jumpy. She'd look over her shoulder when walking to her car. She'd hesitate before opening her front door. She started making excuses to avoid going places alone, especially after dark. But here's the tragic part. Nobody took the threat seriously enough. Courtney's friends and family knew Derek was angry, but they didn't understand the depth of his rage or the lengths he'd go to restore his damaged pride. They saw this as typical relationship drama, not a murder plot in motion. Even Courtney herself didn't fully grasp how dangerous her situation had become. The warning signs were everywhere if you knew how to read them. Derek's social media activity became increasingly erratic and aggressive. He posted cryptic messages about loyalty and betrayal. He shared content about people who run their mouths facing consequences. He was building a public narrative that would justify what he was planning to do. Meanwhile, Courtney was trying to move forward with her life. She focused on her children, worked her shifts, and tried to create the peaceful environment she'd promised herself after losing her sister. She thought Derek's anger would eventually cool down, that he'd find someone else to blame for his problems. She had no idea that every day she continued living her normal life was another day Derek spent planning her execution. The final weeks before the murder, Derek's behavior became even more obsessive. He was asking mutual friends about Courtney's schedule, her routines, where her children went to school. He was gathering intelligence like a military operation. This wasn't passion or jealousy. This was premeditated revenge disguised as wounded love. August 20th, 2024 started like any other Tuesday for the Reese household. Courtney had gotten her 4 children ready for the day. School clothes laid out, breakfast made, the usual chaos of a single mother managing everything alone. Her 11-year-old son helped wrangle his younger sisters, ages 9, 6, and 3. By evening, the house had settled into its familiar rhythm of homework, dinner, and winding down for bed. Just before 9 p.m., Courtney stepped outside her home on Springside Drive Southeast. Maybe she needed to take a phone call. Maybe she wanted some fresh air. Maybe she heard something that made her curious. Security footage would later show that she had no idea what was waiting for her in the darkness. Derek Rankins had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment when she'd be alone and vulnerable. The Ring doorbell camera captured everything that happened next, and what it recorded would haunt everyone who saw it. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting match that escalated into violence. Just Derek emerging from the shadows with a gun in his hand and murder in his heart. Courtney saw him and immediately knew she was in mortal danger. You can hear her voice on that footage, desperate and pleading. She's trying to reason with a man whose rage had already consumed any trace of the person she once knew. "Please, Derek, please," she begs, backing away toward a neighbor's porch. But Derek wasn't there to talk. He wasn't there to argue or threaten or make a point. He was there to execute the woman who destroyed his reputation. The first click was the sound of his gun jamming. For one terrifying moment, Courtney thought she might have a chance to run, to scream for help, to somehow survive this nightmare. But Derek quickly cleared the jam and raised the weapon again. What happened next was pure execution, methodical, brutal, and captured in horrifying detail by technology that was supposed to make neighborhoods safer. 10 shots rang out across Springside Drive. Not the rapid-fire spray of someone losing control, but the deliberate pace of someone making sure their target was completely destroyed. Derek stood over Courtney's body and kept firing until he was certain she would never speak his secrets again. Each bullet was a statement. This is what happens to people who expose me. Inside the house, 4 children heard every single shot. The oldest tried to shield his younger siblings, but there was no protecting them from the sound of their mother being murdered just outside their front door. They heard her final screams. They heard the gunshots that ended her life. They heard the terrible silence that followed. In 27 seconds, Derek Rankins had orphaned 4 children and shattered a family forever. Neighbors came running from every direction. 911 lines lit up with frantic calls about shots fired, a woman down, children screaming inside a house. Red and blue lights flooded the quiet residential street as paramedics and police descended on the scene. But by the time help arrived, Courtney was already gone. Her children were left alone with a trauma that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Derek had vanished into the night, leaving behind a crime scene that would become evidence in one of Atlanta's most brutal domestic violence cases. The Ring camera footage that captured Courtney's final moments would soon become the most shared and most controversial piece of evidence in the investigation. But for her 4 children, huddled together inside their home, the real nightmare was just beginning. The investigation into Courtney's murder moved faster than most Atlanta homicide cases, and for one simple reason. Derek had left behind a digital trail that led straight back to him. The Ring camera footage didn't just capture the murder, it captured his face, his build, his methodical execution style. Within hours, detectives had a clear suspect and a mountain of evidence pointing directly at Derek Rankins. But having evidence and catching your suspect are 2 completely different things. Derek had vanished the moment those gunshots stopped echoing through the neighborhood. He knew every back road, every safe house, every person in Atlanta who might hide him from the law. This wasn't his first time running from police, and he'd learned how to disappear when the heat got too intense. Atlanta police immediately issued a citywide bolo, "Be on the lookout," with Derek's photo plastered across every patrol car computer and police station bulletin board. They warned that he was armed, extremely dangerous, and likely to resist arrest violently. The man who'd just executed a mother in front of her children's home wasn't going to surrender peacefully to face a murder charge. For 6 agonizing days, Derek stayed one step ahead of law enforcement. Rumors placed him everywhere from the West Side projects to suburban safe houses in Henry County. Every tip that came in led to empty apartments and cold trails. Meanwhile, Courtney's family was living in terror, knowing that the man who'd murdered their daughter and sister was still out there, still armed, still capable of striking again. The break in the case came from an unexpected source, Derek's own desperation. After nearly a week of hiding, moving from place to place, sleeping with one eye open. He'd made his way to Stockbridge, Georgia, 30 miles south of Atlanta, in a quiet subdivision called Swan Lake. Derek thought he'd found sanctuary in a house where he could lay low until the heat died down. On August 27th, members of the U.S. Marshal Service, working with Henry County Police and Atlanta detectives, surrounded that house. They'd received a tip that Derek was inside, and this time, the intelligence was solid. What should have been a routine arrest warrant service turned into something much more dangerous when Derek decided he wasn't going back to jail alive. The moment law enforcement announced their presence, Derek opened fire. This wasn't a man trying to escape. This was someone who'd already decided that his story would end in violence. Bullets flew in both directions as officers took cover and tried to establish communication with the barricaded suspect. An Atlanta Police Department officer assigned to the Fugitive Task Force was struck and wounded in the exchange. For hours, the standoff continued. Negotiators tried to talk Derek into surrendering, but the man who'd murdered Courtney in cold blood had no intention of facing trial for his crimes. He'd rather die in a shootout than spend the rest of his life in prison, branded as both a murderer and someone whose sexual secrets had been exposed to the world. When the gunfire finally stopped, Derek Rankins was dead inside that Stockbridge house. Whether he died from police bullets or turned the gun on himself remains unclear in public records. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation launched an independent review that kept those details sealed. What was clear was that Derek had chosen violence over accountability, death over facing the consequences of his actions. The manhunt was over, but justice felt incomplete. There would be no trial, no moment for Courtney's family to look Derek in the eyes and demand answers. No opportunity for her children to understand why the man who'd once been part of their lives had destroyed everything they'd ever known about safety and love. Today, 4 children wake up every morning in a world that will never feel safe again. The oldest is now 12, carrying memories of that August night that no child should ever have to bear. He remembers the sound of his mother's voice pleading for her life. He remembers trying to shield his younger sisters from sounds that still echo in his nightmares. He's become the man of the house at an age when he should be worried about middle school homework and video games. The 9-year-old asks questions that break her family's heart. She wants to know why someone would hurt her mama, why the police couldn't save her, why bad things happen to good people. Her Aunt Lena tries to answer, but how do you explain to a child that sometimes people's shame and rage matter more to them than innocent lives? How do you tell a little girl that her mother died because she told the truth about someone who was living a lie? The 6-year-old still sets a place for her mother at dinner sometimes. She draws pictures of their family with 5 people instead of 4, because in her mind, Mama is just away for a while. The 3-year-old, now 4, asks when Mommy is coming home from her trip. These babies don't understand permanence yet, don't grasp that the woman who used to make them breakfast and sing them to sleep is never walking through that door again. Travis Edwards, their grandfather, has buried 2 daughters in 90 days. 2 of his children, gone to senseless violence before they reached 35 years old. He's raising 4 grandchildren while processing grief that would destroy most people. Some mornings, he says, he doesn't know how he finds the strength to get out of bed. But those 4 faces depending on him keep him moving forward, one day at a time. The family has started a foundation in Courtney's name, focused on domestic violence prevention and supporting children who've witnessed traumatic violence. They're working to change laws around threat assessment and intervention, pushing for systems that take escalating domestic abuse seriously before it turns lethal. Courtney's death wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a systemic failure that demands systemic solutions. But the real legacy of Courtney Ree lives in the love she poured into her children during the 32 years she had on this earth. Her oldest son has her determination. Her daughters have her infectious laugh. They carry pieces of her spirit that Derek's bullets couldn't destroy. And every day they choose to keep living, keep loving, keep believing in goodness despite witnessing the worst humanity has to offer. They prove that love is stronger than hate. Here's what I find fascinating about human nature. Right now, there are people watching this who are genuinely outraged by what happened to Courtney and her children. You're angry about the injustice, heartbroken for those kids, and you want to see change. But here's the test of whether you actually mean it or if you're just performing empathy for yourself. Subscribe to this channel. Because if you can't be bothered to click a free button to support content that gives voices to victims like Courtney, then your outrage is just empty theater. And for those of you typing angry comments about how you don't need to subscribe to care, you're proving my point. You care more about defending your ego than supporting victim stories. Real supporters subscribe. Fake supporters make excuses. Which one are you? The comment section will tell us everything we need to know about who you really are.